Kishore, I agree with you that, yes, China has every right to be a great power, and actually they've accomplished an amazing developmental success story. And I understand great powers never like to be deposed and replaced by others. But I think in your argument, and what I'd like to ask you about, is China is not just another great power. It is a Marxist-Leninist regime that under Xi Jinping has become very, very different than we experienced in the 80s, even in the 90s after the 1989 Beijing massacre and demonstrations. And I think that without factoring that element into the equation, we can't just blithely say, China wants to be a great power, wants to trade with everybody wants to trade with it, because there is another element in the equation, namely what China is after as a new kind of techno-autocracy in the world, and whether other countries feel comfortable with that. Now, we were talking upstairs a bit about the Philippines. I watch the Philippines extremely carefully because I see that as a kind of a Richter scale. I mean, Southeast Asia, fair enough. Singapore, caught in the middle, doesn't want to have to choose. Malaysia, I get it. But I think we may be approaching a point where it's going to be at least more difficult, if not impossible, to stand in the middle. And I think we see in the Philippines flickers of that recognition. Now, admittedly, the world is always in flux. So I'm curious to know how you view the internal political shift in China, where it is returning to a much more sort of Maoist mode, not completely so, and how other countries, the comfort levels they feel about accepting China's hegemony in Asia, if not in the world. Are you comfortable with this? I mean, Singapore is a small little country. How do you feel about that? Yes, you want to keep trading, but there are other factors here I think you have to take into consideration.
Well, first of all, let me, if you don't mind, quickly comment on the point you raised, Rory. When you mentioned that countries are also moving closer to the United States, you're absolutely right. I want to emphasize also, to avoid any misunderstanding, that there are huge reservoirs of goodwill globally towards the United States, and the world is actually quite happy to see a strong United States and a strong China, and to some extent, if they balance each other, that's not too bad for the world at large. So it's not as though the world is rushing to embrace China and saying goodbye America. That's not the world. The world, actually most countries in the world, as you yourself said, Orville, want to have good ties with both United States and China. Now, in your point about the internal political makeup of China, and isn't China becoming more Marxist-Leninist or communist, and are we worried about that? And I think here I want to emphasize that there is only one country in the world that passes judgments on the internal political systems of other countries. It's a very exceptional country, and I think you all know of American exceptionalism. I can tell you that, you know, the UN is not too far away from here. It's a mile or two away. If you walk into the United Nations, you will find that one of the most sacred principles of the UN Charter, which is actually held to very strongly by member states of the UN, is that we will not interfere in each other's internal affairs. That's enshrined in the UN Charter, and that principle is used by most states when they deal with each other. So the attitude of most states in the world is, you choose your form of government. No matter what you choose, we will deal with the government in power. And so whether China is more Marxist or less Marxist or democratic or undemocratic, we cannot get to choose. It's up to the Chinese at the end of the day choose what kind of government that they have. But I do think also, if I can, or will push a little bit back at you, you know, when the United States first fell in love with China in 1971, can I ask you, who was the leader of China at that point? Was it Mao Zedong? Would you call Mao Zedong a great defender of human rights? Would you say that this is a man with a liberal mind, a liberal spirit, someone you can, develop a kinship with? You know what I'm getting at, right? So when it comes to geopolitics, it's a very cruel business. Ideology can be put aside when necessary, can be brought to the fore when necessary. And even today, if you say that the United States will stand up to Communist parties' regimes, why are you cultivating Vietnam? What's the difference? I mean, doesn't Vietnam also have a communist party in power? So I'm only saying this because the rest of the world, when I say that the rest of the world has changed, they've become much more sophisticated. They see through all this. They see that, yes, there's a serious geopolitical contest going on between the United States and China. They are very worried about it. They want to maintain good ties with both, and they won't pass judgment. And it's not just, to be fair, Orville, it's not just Singapore. I can give you, if you want a list of 100 countries, I can give you a list of 100 countries that are in that position.